She walked into that office every morning with a smile, but inside, she was dying. Her boss, the man everyone respected, the one with the corner office and the perfect reputation, was destroying her life piece by piece. And no one knew. For months, she endured comments that made her skin crawl. Touches that lasted too long. Meetings behind closed doors that left her shaking. She told herself it wasn't that bad, that she was overreacting, that if she just stayed quiet, it would stop. It didn't. Instead, it got worse. Every day he grew bolder. Every day she felt smaller. The fear became constant. The anxiety, unbearable. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except surviving the next workday. HR, untouchable. His influence stretched everywhere. Speaking up felt like signing her own termination letter. So she stayed silent. But here's what he didn't know. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Because while he thought she was broken, she was gathering something far more powerful than tears. Evidence, patterns, truth. And when she finally made her move, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was strategic. And it brought an entire company to its knees. What happened next shocked everyone, including him. Because the woman he thought he'd destroyed, she became the one thing he never saw coming. A survivor who refused to stay silent. This is her story. And if you've ever felt powerless, intimidated, or silenced, stay with me. Because what she did next will change the way you think about courage forever. Let's begin. It started on her third week. She was excited, nervous, hopeful. This was her dream job. Good salary, reputable company, a chance to finally build the career she'd worked so hard for. Her boss seemed professional at first, polite, even friendly. But then came the first comment. "You look really good in that dress." She smiled awkwardly, brushed it off. Maybe he was just being nice? Then came the second. "I love how you always smell so good." That one felt different, uncomfortable, but she convinced herself she was overthinking it. By the end of the month, the comments became routine. "You should wear your hair down more often. That color really suits your skin. You brighten up the office." At first, she thought maybe this was just how he talked to everyone. But when she looked around, she realized he only said these things to her. Never to the men, never to the older women. Just her. And then the touching started. A hand on her shoulder during meetings, a brush of his fingers when handing her documents, standing too close when reviewing her work. Each time her instincts screamed, but her mind rationalized. He's just being friendly. I don't want to cause problems. What if I'm wrong? So she stayed quiet. But the fear grew. She started dreading meetings, avoiding eye contact, finding excuses to leave the room early. Her coworkers noticed she seemed distant. They asked if she was okay. She lied, said she was fine. Because how do you explain that the person everyone admires makes you feel unsafe? How do you admit that every time he calls you into his office, your heart races with panic? How do you prove something that happens behind closed doors? So she smiled, worked harder, hoped it would pass. But deep down she knew this wasn't going away. And the worst part? She had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Because what started as uncomfortable comments was about to escalate into something far more terrifying. And she was completely unprepared for what came next. 2 months in, everything changed. He started calling her into his office more frequently. Always alone. Always with the door closed. At first, it was work-related. Performance reviews, project updates. But then the conversation shifted. He'd ask personal questions. Do you have a boyfriend? What do you do on weekends? You seem lonely. Are you lonely? She'd deflect. Keep answers short. Try to steer back to work. But he didn't stop. One afternoon, during what was supposed to be a quick check-in, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, you're different from the others. You have this energy." Her stomach dropped. She mumbled something about needing to get back to her desk. He smiled. "Don't be in such a rush. I enjoy our time together." That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the conversation over and over. The tone, the look in his eyes. It wasn't professional. It wasn't innocent. It was intentional, and it was escalating. And it was... The next week, he started texting her after hours. "Hope you got home safe. Thinking about our meeting today. You looked tired. Make sure you rest." Messages that seemed caring on the surface, but felt invasive underneath. She didn't respond. Hoped he'd get the hint. He didn't. The texts became more frequent, more personal. "Wish we could talk more outside of work. You're always on my mind." Her anxiety spiked. Every notification made her flinch. She considered blocking him. But what if that made things worse? What if he retaliated? So she stayed polite, professional, distant. But he interpreted her silence as encouragement. One evening, she was working late, finishing a report he'd assigned. He walked into her cubicle, stood too close. "You work too hard," he said softly. She forced a smile, kept typing. Then she felt it. His hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "You should take care of yourself," he whispered. Her entire body froze. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stayed there for what felt like an eternity, then walked away. That night, she sat in her car and cried. Not because she was weak, but because she realized this wasn't going to stop, and no one was going to believe her. He was too powerful, too respected, too untouchable. But what she didn't know yet, her breaking point was still ahead, and when it came, it would change everything. She stopped wearing dresses to work, started arriving later, leaving earlier, did everything she could to avoid being alone with him. But he adapted. If she avoided his office, he'd corner her in the break room. If she skipped team lunches, he'd find her at her desk. He was always watching, always waiting. And the worst part? Everyone else saw him as the perfect boss, supportive, encouraging, charismatic. No one noticed the way he looked at her. No one heard the things he said when they were alone. She felt like she was living in two realities, one where she was drowning in fear, and one where everyone thought she was lucky to work for him. She considered quitting, but she needed the job, needed the income, needed the experience. And if she left, what would she say in interviews? "I quit because my boss made me uncomfortable." Without proof, it sounded like an excuse. So she stayed and tried to convince herself she could handle it. But her body told a different story. She lost weight, stopped sleeping, developed constant headaches. Her friends noticed, asked what was wrong. She couldn't tell them. Couldn't admit that she felt weak, powerless, trapped. One night, her best friend asked directly, "Is someone hurting you?" She almost broke, almost told her everything. But then she thought about what would happen if word got out. What if HR found out and did nothing? What if they sided with him? What if she became known as the woman who caused problems? So she lied. "I'm just stressed about work." Her friend didn't believe her, but didn't push. And she was left alone with her fear. Weeks turned into months. The harassment became routine. She learned to predict his patterns, avoid certain hallways, time her breaks. She became an expert at survival. But inside, she was crumbling. Until one day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't a big moment. It was small. She was in the bathroom staring at herself in the mirror, and she barely recognized the woman looking back. Tired, terrified, defeated. And in that moment, something inside her whispered, "This isn't sustainable. You're not going to survive this. Something has to change." She didn't know what yet, didn't have a plan. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. Anger, not at herself, at him, at the system that protected him, at the silence that enabled him. And that anger, it became the spark she didn't know she needed. Because what came next would test her in ways she never imagined. But it would also reveal a strength she didn't know she had. It happened on a Tuesday, an ordinary day that would become anything but. He called her into his office for an urgent discussion. She went, like always, but this time felt different. The door closed. He didn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he sat on the edge, directly in front of her, too close. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately," he said. Her heart raced. "About your career," he added, smirking slightly. "You have a lot of potential." She nodded, staying silent. "But I feel like there's a barrier between us, like you don't trust me." His eyes locked on hers. "I want us to have a better connection." The word hung in the air. She knew what he meant. "I appreciate your support," she said carefully, "but I'm focused on my work." His expression shifted, just slightly. "That's what I admire about you," he said, standing. "Your dedication." He walked around her chair, slowly. She felt his presence behind her. But dedication only gets you so far. In this company, relationships matter. He placed both hands on the back of her chair. "And I can make sure you go very far." Her breath caught. "Or..." He leaned down, his voice now inches from her ear. "I can make things very difficult." Time stopped. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe. "Think about it," he said casually, stepping back. "Let me know." He opened the door, smiled. "Thanks for stopping by." She walked out on autopilot, made it to her car, and broke. Not with tears, with rage, pure, raw rage. For months, she'd blamed herself, questioned herself, minimized what was happening. But that moment stripped away every excuse. He had just threatened her, explicitly. And she finally saw it clearly. This wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to change. And if she didn't do something, it would only get worse. But what could she do? She had no proof, no witnesses, just her word against his. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, stared at her phone, and thought about every woman who'd stayed silent before her. Every woman who'd quit quietly, every woman who'd been blamed, doubted, dismissed. And she made a decision. She wasn't going to be one of them. She didn't know how yet, didn't know if she'd succeed. But she knew one thing. She was done being afraid. The next morning, she walked into work with a different energy. Not confident, not fearless, but determined. And she did something she'd never done before. She started keeping a record, not just in her head, in writing, dates, times, exact words, every comment, every text, every uncomfortable interaction. She saved every message, documented every meeting, and she did it quietly because she knew if she was going to take him down, she couldn't make a single mistake. And the clock had just started ticking. She became methodical. Every interaction with him she documented. Date, time, location, witnesses, if any. She created a private folder on her personal laptop, password protected. She backed it up on a USB drive, kept it hidden. She started screenshotting every text he sent, saving every email, recording the time and context of every meeting. It wasn't easy, because documenting meant reliving. Sighs. Every entry forced her to confront what was happening. But she pushed through, because she realized something powerful. Her memory could be questioned, but evidence couldn't. She also started observing him more carefully, his patterns, his behavior with others, and that's when she noticed something chilling. Gasps. He was careful. Never harassed her in front of senior staff. Always chose moments when they were alone or with junior employees who wouldn't speak up. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, which meant he'd probably done this before. That thought led her to another realization. She might not be the only one. So she started asking questions, casually, carefully. She reached out to a former employee on LinkedIn, a woman who'd left the company suddenly. "Hey, I hope this doesn't sound weird, but how was your experience working there?" The response came 3 days later. "Why do you ask?" She hesitated, then typed, "I'm going through something difficult. Just trying to understand if it's me or..." The woman called her that night, and what she shared made everything click into place. Same boss, same behavior, same tactics. Inappropriate comments, texts after hours, closed-door meetings. And when she'd tried to report it, HR had dismissed her, said there was no evidence, suggested she was misinterpreting friendliness. She'd quit rather than endure it. "I'm so sorry," the woman said. "I should have fought harder, but I was scared." "It's not your fault," she replied. But inside, she felt a new resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman he'd done this to, and every woman he'd do it to in the future. Over the next few weeks, she found 2 more. Different departments, different years. Same story. They shared their experiences, their documentation, what little they had. And together they realized they had a pattern. Not just one woman's word against his, but multiple testimonies, spanning years. Still, she knew it wouldn't be easy. He was powerful, well-connected. The company had protected him before. Why would this time be different? She needed more than just stories. She needed something undeniable. So she made a risky decision. She stopped avoiding him, started responding to his texts, briefly, professionally, attended meetings when he asked. But now every interaction had a purpose. She was building a case, and he had no idea. Because while he thought she was finally coming around, she was collecting evidence that would dismantle everything he'd built. The tension was unbearable. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. But she kept going. Because she knew the moment she stopped, he'd win. And she'd already decided. That wasn't an option anymore. He was getting bolder. As she continued documenting, his behavior escalated. He started making comments in front of others, testing boundaries. "She's my favorite," he'd say during team meetings, winking at her. "Don't know what I'd do without her." The words seemed harmless on the surface, but she saw the discomfort in her coworkers' eyes. They sensed something was off. But no one said anything, because he was the boss, and challenging him meant risking everything. One afternoon, during a video call with a client, he interrupted her presentation. "Sorry, I just got distracted by how well she's explaining this. She's brilliant." The client laughed politely. She forced a smile. But inside, she was screaming. After the call, he messaged her privately. "You handled that perfectly. I love watching you work." She didn't respond. 2 hours later, another message. "Don't ignore me." Her stomach twisted. This was new. Before, he'd been patient, manipulative. Now he sounded entitled. Like he believed she owed him something. She saved the message, added it to her growing file. That weekend, he texted her at midnight. "Are you awake?" She stared at her phone, didn't reply. Another message came through. "I know you saw this." Then another. "We need to talk. I'm worried about you." The manipulation was obvious, but what scared her was the shift in tone, from predatory to possessive. She realized he thought he had control over her, and when she didn't respond the way he wanted, he felt threatened, which made him dangerous. Monday morning, she walked into the office early, found a gift on her desk. A small box, wrapped carefully, no note. But she knew who it was from. Inside was an expensive bracelet. Her hands shook. This wasn't a gesture of kindness. It was a power move, a message. "I'm thinking about you. I'm watching you." She photographed it, documented the date and time, then returned it to his office when he wasn't there, left it on his desk without a word. That afternoon, he called her in. His expression was cold. "I tried to do something nice for you," he said quietly. "I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept gifts from my supervisor," she replied calmly. His jaw tightened. "You know, you've been acting differently lately." "I'm just focused on my work." "Are you sure that's all it is?" The question hung between them. She held his gaze. "Yes." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good, because I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings between us." The threat was clear. She left his office, went straight to the bathroom, and finally let herself feel the fear. But this time, something was different. The fear didn't paralyze her, it fueled her, because she realized he was losing control. And when powerful men lose control, they make mistakes. She just needed to be patient, to keep documenting, to stay one step ahead, because the mask he'd worn for so long, it was starting to crack. And when it finally shattered, she'd be ready. She couldn't do this alone anymore. Not just emotionally, strategically. She needed help, real help. So she reached back out to the women she'd connected with, the former employees who'd survived him. She arranged a video call. 3 women, 3 stories, 1 common enemy. "I've been documenting everything," she told them. "Dates, messages, incidents. I have months of evidence." One of the women, Sarah, spoke up. "I have some too. I never deleted his messages. I just couldn't bring myself to." Another, Maya, added, "I reported him to HR. They buried it, but I kept copies of my complaint." The third, Jen, hesitated, then said, "I recorded one of our meetings. I didn't know what else to do." They looked at each other through their screens and realized together they had something powerful, not just individual claims, but a documented pattern spanning 5 years. Multiple women, similar tactics, corroborated evidence. "What if we combined everything?" she suggested. "Went to someone outside the company, a lawyer, maybe even the press." Sarah looked nervous. "That's risky. He has connections. The company will protect him." "They've already protected him," Maya shot back. "That's why we're here." Jen nodded slowly. "I'm tired of being afraid. I'm in." One by one, they agreed. They would pool their evidence, build an airtight case, and expose him. Not just internally, but publicly if needed. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked in secret, created a shared, encrypted folder, organized their documentation chronologically, highlighted patterns, similar language, escalation tactics, retaliation after rejection. They consulted with an employment attorney, pro bono at first. The lawyer reviewed their evidence carefully, then looked up. "This is solid, really solid. If you're willing to move forward, we have a case." She felt a surge of hope, but also terror, because moving forward meant no turning back. "What are the risks?" she asked. "Retaliation, public scrutiny. It won't be easy," the lawyer admitted, "but you're not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for every woman who comes after you." They sat with that, then she spoke. "I'm ready." The others nodded. And just like that, the plan was set in motion. The lawyer drafted a formal complaint, detailed every incident, every witness, every piece of evidence. They submitted it to the company's legal department, not HR, legal. Because they knew HR had already failed them, they also sent copies to the company's board of directors and kept a record for themselves. The response came faster than expected. An internal investigation was launched. She was asked to participate in interviews. So were the others. At first, it felt validating, like finally someone was listening. But then the pressure started. Colleagues whispered, avoided eye contact. Someone leaked that an investigation was happening. Rumors spread. She felt eyes on her everywhere, some supportive, many judgmental. Why didn't she say something sooner? Maybe she's exaggerating. She's just trying to get attention. The doubt was suffocating, but every time she wavered, she looked at the evidence, the messages, the patterns, the other women's stories, and she remembered she wasn't making this up. This was real. And it was time the world knew. But just when she thought the investigation would bring justice, something happened that changed everything, and it wasn't what she expected. The company moved quickly, but not in the way she'd hoped. 3 days after the investigation began, she was called into a meeting, not with investigators, with the head of HR and the company's legal counsel. Her stomach dropped. They sat across from her, stone-faced. "We take these allegations very seriously," the HR director began, "which is why we need to ensure we have all the facts." She nodded, waiting. "We've interviewed several employees, reviewed your claims." A pause. "And we've also received a counter-complaint." Her blood ran cold. "A what?" "Your supervisor has filed a complaint against you." She couldn't breathe. "He claims you've been insubordinate, hostile, and that you've been spreading false rumors about him to damage his reputation." The room spun. This was retaliation, textbook retaliation. "That's not true," she said, voice shaking. "We're not making any conclusions yet," the lawyer interjected. "But we need to investigate both sides." "Both sides?" she repeated. I have evidence, messages, dates, witnesses. And we'll review all of it, HR said coolly. But until the investigation concludes, we're placing you on administrative leave. Her heart stopped. You're suspending me? It's paid leave, standard procedure. And him? She demanded. Is he on leave too? A beat of silence. He's continuing his duties while the investigation is ongoing. She stared at them in disbelief. She, the victim, was being removed, while he, the harasser, stayed in power. This is exactly what he wants, she said, voice rising. He's retaliating because I spoke up. We understand you're upset, HR said, but we have to follow protocol. Protocol. The word felt like a slap. She left that meeting in a daze, called the lawyer immediately. They suspended me, not him. Me. The lawyer sighed. Unfortunately, this is common. They're trying to control the narrative. What do I do? Document everything, every email, every conversation. This is retaliation, and it strengthens your case. But it didn't feel like strength. It felt like betrayal. She'd done everything right, gathered evidence, followed procedure, sought help. And still, the system was protecting him. That night, she almost gave up, almost decided it wasn't worth it. But then her phone buzzed, a message from Maya. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry, but don't stop now. We're with you. Then Sarah. They did the same thing to me, that's why I quit, but you're stronger than I was. Keep going. Then Jen. You're not alone. We're going to finish this together. She read their messages over and over and realized this was bigger than her. If she backed down now, he'd win, and the next woman wouldn't stand a chance. So she made a decision. If the company wouldn't hold him accountable, she'd take this further. The next morning, she contacted a journalist, someone who specialized in workplace misconduct investigations. She sent an anonymous tip, outlined the situation, the pattern, the retaliation. Within 48 hours, the journalist responded. This is a story that needs to be told. Are you willing to go on record? She hesitated. Going public meant risking everything, her career, her privacy, her safety. But staying silent meant letting him destroy more lives. She typed back, yes, I'm ready. And with that single word, everything was about to explode. The investigation took 2 months. 2 months of interviews, evidence review, and mounting tension. The journalist worked carefully, verifying every claim, interviewing witnesses, obtaining documents. Meanwhile, she remained on leave, isolated, anxious, waiting. But she wasn't idle. She connected with advocacy groups, spoke with other survivors, learned her rights, and most importantly, she prepared herself mentally. Because she knew when the story broke, there'd be no going back. Then, one morning, her phone exploded with notifications. The article was published. Pattern of harassment. Multiple women accused senior executive at company name. It was detailed, damning, undeniable. Her story, along with Sarah's, Maya's, and Jen's, was laid out clearly, with dates, screenshots, testimonies. The journalist had done their homework. The response was immediate. Social media erupted. Employees, current and former, began sharing their own experiences. The hashtag spread. News outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, the company was under a spotlight it couldn't ignore. Within 24 hours, the board of directors issued a statement. We are deeply disturbed by these allegations and are conducting a thorough review. Within 48 hours, he was placed on administrative leave. Finally, but it wasn't over. The internal investigation intensified, more women came forward, the evidence became overwhelming, and then the company made its move. A press release. Company name parts ways with senior executive following internal investigation. He was fired, not quietly, not with a golden paracrase. Publicly, permanently. She read the announcement 3 times, then sat in silence. It was done. He was gone. But she didn't feel triumphant. She felt exhausted because the fight had taken everything from her, her sense of safety, her mental health, her trust in systems. But she'd also gained something, her voice, her power. her refusal to be silenced. And she'd done something even more important. She'd protected the women who would come after her. A week later, the company reached out. They wanted to settle. Compensation for her suffering. An NDA, she refused the NDA. I didn't go through this to be silenced again. Her lawyer negotiated. The company agreed to policy changes, mandatory harassment training, independent reporting channels, accountability measures, and they agreed to compensate her and the other women fairly. But most importantly, they agreed to let her story stand. No silencing, no erasure. She accepted, not because the money made it worth it, but because the changes might save someone else. Months later, she left the company, not in defeat, but on her own terms. She found a new job, a better environment. But more than that, she found herself. The woman who'd been too scared to speak, she was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who refused to be intimidated. And she started using her voice differently now. She spoke at conferences, shared her story, mentored young women, not as a victim, as a survivor, as proof that courage, even when it's terrifying, can change everything because she'd learned something powerful. Silence protects abusers. But speaking up, even when you're shaking, even when you're scared, protects everyone else. And that's a legacy worth fighting for. The story didn't end with her, determined it couldn't. Because once the truth came out, it created a ripple effect. Other companies began reviewing their own policies. Employees felt emboldened to report misconduct. Survivors reached out to her, dozens of them. Empathetic? Sharing their own stories, asking for advice, seeking hope. And she listened. Because she remembered what it felt like to be alone in that fear. She started a blog, not for fame, not for attention, but to create a resource, a place where women could learn how to document harassment, how to navigate HR, how to find legal support, how to protect themselves. The blog grew. Women from different industries, different countries shared their experiences, and together they built something powerful, a community of survivors who refused to stay silent. Inspired, she also partnered with nonprofit organizations, helped develop workplace safety training, advocated for stronger legal protections, testified before legislative committees. Her voice, once silenced by fear, was now shaping policy. But the most meaningful moments were the personal ones. The messages from women who said, "I read your story. It gave me the courage to report what happened to me. Because of you, I didn't quit. I fought back. You made me realize I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. It was real." Those messages reminded her why she'd fought so hard, why she'd endured the scrutiny, the doubt, the exhaustion. Because her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd been silenced, every woman who'd been blamed, every woman who'd been told she was overreacting. And now those women had proof. They weren't alone, and they didn't have to accept it. One day she received an email from a young woman. She was going through something similar, scared, uncertain, considering quitting. She wrote back, "You don't have to decide everything today. Just take it one step at a time. Document everything, reach out for support. And remember, your fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. What you do with that fear is what defines you." The young woman wrote back weeks later. She'd reported the harassment. The company had investigated, and the harasser had been removed. "Thank you," and she wrote, "I wouldn't have done it without your story." She read that message and cried, not from sadness, from relief, because it meant the fight had been worth it. Her pain had purpose, her story had power, and the system, slowly, imperfectly, was starting to change. Not because of one person, but because of every person who refused to stay silent. She'd become part of something larger than herself. A movement, a shift, a refusal to let fear win. And while she knew there was still so much work to do, so many systems to change, so many survivors still suffering, she also knew this. Progress was possible, justice was possible, and courage, even when it felt impossible, was always worth it. Because the woman who'd walked into that office full of hope, terrified and alone, she'd walked out transformed, not broken, unbreakable. If you're reading this and you're going through something similar, first, I want you to know you are not alone. I know it feels like you are. I know every day feels like survival. I know the fear is suffocating, but you are not alone. What's happening to you is not your fault. You didn't cause it. You don't deserve it. And no matter what anyone says, you're not overreacting. Your instincts are right. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. Trust yourself. I also want you to know you don't have to have it all figured out right now. You don't have to be brave every single day. Some days just surviving is enough. But when you're ready, when you feel even a flicker of strength, start small. Document what's happening. Dates, times, exact words, save messages, emails, any proof you can gather. Not because you've decided to report it yet, but because if you ever choose to, you'll need it. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, a therapist. You don't have to carry this alone. And if the people around you don't believe you, find people who will. There are advocacy groups, hotlines, legal resources, people who specialize in helping survivors, people who will believe you. I know it's scary to speak up. I know you're afraid of losing your job, your reputation, your stability. I was too, but I also learned something important. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the person hurting you, and every day you stay silent, the abuse continues. I'm not saying you have to report it right now. I'm not saying you have to go public. I'm saying you have options, and you deserve to explore them. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to work without fear. And if the system fails you like it failed me at first, don't give up, because the system is changing, slowly, imperfectly, but it's changing. And it's changing because survivors like you and me refused to stay silent. So if you're ready to fight, fight. If you're not ready yet, that's okay too. Healing isn't linear. Justice isn't immediate, but both are possible. I also want to say this. Whatever you decide, you are enough. You are strong enough. You are brave enough, even on the days you don't feel like it, especially on those days, because surviving this, enduring this fear every single day, that's courage. And when you're ready to use that courage to fight back, you'll be unstoppable. I believe in you. Every survivor who came before you believes in you, and the women who will come after you are counting on you. Not because you owe them anything, but because your voice, your truth, has power, and the world needs to hear it. So take your time, gather your strength, document your truth, and when you're ready, speak. Because your silence was never weakness, it was preparation. And when you finally break that silence, you won't just free yourself. You'll free everyone who comes after you, and that is the most powerful thing you can do. Her story didn't end with revenge. It ended with resilience, with proof that even when the system fails you, your voice can still change everything. She walked into that office afraid. She walked out a survivor. And now her story is helping countless others do the same. Because harassment doesn't end with one person. It ends when we stop accepting it, when we stop blaming victims, when we start holding abusers accountable, and when survivors stop staying silent. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar, if you know someone who has, please know, there is help. There are resources, and there are people ready to believe you. Include links to resources, RAIN, National Women's Law Center, Workplace Fairness, Time's Up. And if you're not a survivor but you want to help, listen, believe, support. Don't ask, why didn't you report it sooner? Ask, how can I help you now? Because every survivor's journey is different, but every survivor deserves support. If this video moved you, please share it. Not for views, but because someone in your life might need to hear this. Someone might be silently suffering right now, and your share could be the reminder they need that they're not alone. Subscribe if you want to hear more survivor stories. Stories of courage, of resilience, of justice. Because these stories matter. These voices matter. And together we can create a world where no one has to stay silent out of fear. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And to every survivor reading this, you are seen, you are believed, and you are so much stronger than you know. Keep going.